Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Sorry I've been gone for so long. Took some time to just have a little vacation with the family, do a little rebranding, recalibrating, some planning for future episodes, and just how we're going to be moving forward. We decided to change the name of the podcast. I know I've done it before, but this will for sure be the last time. The name of the podcast from now on will now be The Shadburn Show. I figured the title of this is a lot more inclusive to, just who I am, who me and Laura are. Obviously, our last name is Shadburn, but it'll be more inclusive to the people that we have on the show. Obviously, we are both faith based people with Christian values and Christian beliefs. And we have conversations with anybody and everybody through the lens of that perspective and that ideology. So, haven't strayed away from anything in that area, just simply changing the name because we want you guys to know who it is that is at this end of the microphone. So, the name of the show from now on will be The Shadburn Show. So, we're excited to launch that. Um, Outside of that, I've been doing a lot of episodes with people from across the world. It's been really cool. My guest for this episode is from Atlanta, Georgia, and his name is Chris Lewis. Chris Lewis is an artist, and uh, he is the owner of the Instagram account Baritus Catholic Illustration. Let me just be frank with this man's artwork. It is very, very good, and it's a new style. It's a new approach to Catholic illustrations. A lot of this is, I guess, I would like to call it old Renaissance art, but it's definitely a lot more than that. He has a lot of projects going where all of this art is really aesthetic. It's pleasing to the eye, and then also he gives a very well thought out historical anecdote or documentation to all of these posts that he makes with this very eye capturing art. So I had Chris on the podcast to talk about basically how he came into this, what inspired him to do this, and his testimony and his walk with the Lord, and just long story short, how he got to where he is today. And the man is an intellectual. I respect this man a lot. He values what he does, and he takes pride in what he does, and you can obviously see it in his artwork. So my encouragement to you would be to check it out. His Instagram account, again, is Baritus Catholic Illustration. Baritus is spelled Baritus, and then Catholic Illustration. He also has a store where you can purchase some of this artwork. You can purchase different graphics or stickers or decals, things like that, things that he himself has created. And honestly, his artwork, I can't say it enough. Uh, it's just very pleasing to look at. I'll just leave it at that. Go check it out yourself, seriously. Um, but before we get into this episode with Chris, I do want to say to everybody who's been listening, keeping up, supporting, giving input, and just, being a good follower here. I appreciate the support. I appreciate everything that you guys have said to me and Laura, the encouragement that you've given us. Thank you all so much, and just keep following, keep liking our videos and our podcast episodes. Keep sharing, keep subscribing. We're just building this one day at a time, and we're hoping that any of these conversations and podcasts that we have on here, we hope that they bless you. We hope that they're entertaining. We hope that they're informative and inspiring. So once again, thank you guys so much for just all the love and the support. If you want to support with money at all, we have donation pages set up. We have a donation page with the podcast website, and we also have a donation page with Patreon, and you can sign up to give as much as you want or just a one-time gift. Anything is appreciated. So thank you guys so much for all the support. with that being said, let's get to the episode. Thank you guys so much for following along and listening. This is Chris Lewis with Baritus Catholic Illustration, and this is the Shadburn Show. All right, we'll get going here in just a second. All right, Chris Lewis, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for inviting me on. I always enjoy getting a chance to talk about art and the faith, so thank
And
you.
sorry for the complications earlier. I couldn't get my technology together and stuff, so I'm glad we're able to finally do this. But you run this incredible Instagram account called Baritus Catholic, and you post this amazing artwork. And for one, I don't even know how you do it, but I mean, it's really cool to look at, and it's kind of neat to collect as well. I noticed you had like some stickers and some other things that you can purchase off your Etsy shop and everything that you sell off of. But uh, dude, I think your artwork is amazing, and I just wanted to give the people a chance to figure out who you are and how you got into this, man. So if you just want to introduce yourself and kind of just talk about how you got into this, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you, and thanks be to God for that because really it was a trajectory I had not planned on as of just a number of years ago. I mean, I've kind of dabbled around with illustration my entire life, but I ended up getting sidetracked a little bit and went into a career with graphic design. It was a little bit more stable to make a steady income doing that, and so I after a little bit of a delay after high school, just doing working various jobs, I eventually went back to school for art and went into the corporate world. So I kind of had forgotten about illustration for years. And on a parallel track, though, I was experiencing a lot of things in my life, and then I had fallen away from the faith, the Christian faith, pretty early in my life, and so through a series of various events, I really became open back up to that reality, and through the Catholic faith, which was something that I had never experienced growing up. And so I became familiar with that in my 20s, and it just really, through the Holy Spirit, just kind of ignited this passion in me to really seek out the truth of Christianity again from a different perspective and more from an perspective. And so, so these two things were kind of happening on parallel paths. You know, I was diving into Christianity again. That's sort of a later period in life. I was working in the corporate world, and the more I was working in the corporate world, and the more the two started to at odds with each other. And I enjoyed what I was doing to a certain degree in my career life, but it just wasn't fulfilling. It wasn't needed, like increasing in my life, and my interest in the faith was becoming, over the course of many years, becoming really the guiding light of everything in my life. It was the center of everything. Between my wife and I and our family, we really made it the center of everything. And so, so this is a long-winded answer, I guess. Just feel free to cut me off. But I eventually got to the point.
You're doing great.
Okay, cool. I just got to the point where it was like, I kind of miss drawing. I'm sitting here all day and looking for somebody else, and I kind of just miss doing my own thing just to enjoy it. And so I just started doodling, and I thought, I'll just start an Instagram account. Maybe 10 people might come across it and appreciate some of this stuff. But I was really hoping to do it to kind of get me back into it. It was my first like true love, and it was something I had really forgotten about for years. And so, yeah, through starting that account, it just kind of blew up, and it gave me momentum. And I'm sure life is funny, especially in the faith, where you just look back uh, a series of years, and you just see God kind of planning your footsteps, and you don't see it in the moment, but you see it when you look back. And I clearly started to see that, and so it led me to a point where I basically felt like I had to make a decision, and this was just absolutely fulfilling everything for me at the time, and so I made the decision to jump into it full time.
Dude.
So
Well, you're getting a lot of attention. I mean, I know you did this just to kind of get yourself back into it, but your artwork has been inspiring for a lot of people, and like, I mean, it shows on the growth of your social media and how much, people are paying attention to it. Um, I thought it was really interesting the things that I started learning on there. I've been a Christian my entire life, but I've never been a part of any Catholic tradition whatsoever.
mhm.
So, very, I guess I should say Baptist oriented, but
Okay,
I'm non-denominational basically. It is what
okay.
it is. But
Well, that's how I
learning
was
about
raised. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So do you lean more towards Catholic faith right now, or is it just Catholic inspired?
Yeah. So, of course, there's a commonality that runs through both. I mean,
Hmm.
Christianity is Jesus is the center. The Trinity is the center of everything. Um, for both of our faith perspectives, right, or faith traditions.
Right.
Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. So, but I'm fully Catholic. I was raised more of a non-denominational in upbringing, and we tried all kinds of different churches growing up. But I did fall away from that pretty early in my like in the first few years of teenage years.
Mm.
And I would have called myself an atheist for years. I was actually quite hostile to Christianity because I had not been taught the Christianity of history. I'd been taught this sort of American fundamentalist idea of Christianity.
Mm.
Um, so when I started catching wind of this longer tradition that went back 2,000 years, I thought, it's interesting. Maybe I need to, just out of my own curiosity, just kind of find out what this is all about. And yeah, that just really ignited something in me, which I attribute to the Holy Spirit, because it was just, I mean, I was on fire to just learn about the possible. So yeah, I mean that I eventually converted into the faith after being convinced. And once you're convinced of truth, I mean, you have to obey your conscience in that regard. And I had no other choice. And
Mm.
but it was a series of conversions. So it happened over many years. There was the first just the openness, and then there was the intellectual conversion to the faith, but then there was the true spiritual conversion, and
Mm.
so yeah, it was a progression of conversions, and now I do the work I do, while graphic illustration is representing the truth, goodness, and beauty of Christianity. It's also the other aspect of it is just promoting the truth of the Catholic Church
Mm.
and all that that stands for. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you said the intellectual convert. You're already coming off to me as an intellectual. So, what was that journey like for you? I guess since you said you were pretty much a hostile atheist at the beginning. So
Yeah.
obviously you went from one end of the spectrum to another. So I guess tell me about that journey.
Yeah. And I say atheist, but I don't. Those weren't terms I would have used at the time. It was more just the. I was really at conflict with a lot of the things that I was taught. Um,
Mm.
for one, the nature of the Bible, the origins of the Bible. If there was much of a explanation of those things to begin with, um, it was not a fulfilling one. Salvation was another one. So these were things that really turned me off to the faith at an early age. The way that it was presented to me. So I had to. So I mean, I guess these days they have a term that you sometimes hear. It's called a nun, an None. It's like basically somebody that just doesn't have time or patience for looking into Christianity. They just kind of go through life as a
Yeah.
a leaf blowing in the wind. That was me for many years. So while I wouldn't have called myself an atheist, I wouldn't have even known the term none. But that was how I lived my life. I think I became hostile to Christianity when it bumped up, actually when it was challenging. There's a lot of personal reasons for that too. So that's not necessarily all on the side of Christians who were trying to share their faith. It was also a lot of the defects in my own soul. But yeah, I'm definitely not an intellectual. I just love history, and so I find it kind of bring things to life for me in a different way when I dig into that and really immerse myself in it. And so I mean, it started by just hearing some conversion stories from people. Honestly, I have a brother-in-law. After I got married, actually, my wife and I met, and our first date actually was going to a Catholic mass. So that was the first time I'd even stepped foot in the Catholic Church. I was 19 or 20, and I before that I had just believed that Catholics worship Mary and some of these things that are clearly not true. They're things that you sometimes hear in more of the fundamentalist circles, and I quickly found out there was a misconception there. Sometimes honestly, sometimes not honestly. But yeah. So once I got past some of those things, and it's like, okay, what is this really about? I don't want to hear about it from the enemies of the church. What's it really about? And where you find that is really digging in history. What were the first Christians talking about? How did they understand the faith? How did they understand Jesus? And so those were the things. After I started hearing other people's conversion stories, I wanted to read that for myself. So I dug back into the earliest possible resources of the church that I could find, and we call these the church fathers in the Christian tradition. And so you read the fathers, and it starts to become very apparent how the church formed, how the Bible came about. And so it convinced me that there wasn't this disconnect of 2,000 years. There was this continuous that was very carefully preserved in time. These things, it immediately grounded Scripture and grounded the realities of Christianity in something that was much larger than our vertical or horizontal understandings of it in this time and day. So it extended beyond America, it extended beyond the 2000s, and it went back 2,000 years into the whole known world at the time of the Roman Empire. And yeah, so that gave me a new perspective, and yeah, that's probably a lot. Now I'm kind of forgetting the question, but that was basically what got me started, and got the ball rolling.
Well, dude, I mean,
sorry,
you're
I
right,
tend to just I go off.
You're
on
totally
a tangent.
fine.
Now I forget what you're. Okay.
No, you're totally good because you're absolutely right though. I mean, basically what I asked was like, how did you get from one end of the perspective to another?
Oh yeah.
And like that's just I mean, to me, you kind of hit it dead on because I think personally, and this is just my personal reflection on like issues that the American church has today is that there isn't this deep enough dive into the historical, archaeological, intellectual, apologetic side of our faith. And I think it's real emotionally driven. I think it's very self-esteem driven. And I mean, I've said it before, and I don't want to be too harsh when I say it and everything, but it just seems like it caters to a little too much to our ego in some retrospect, and there's to me a greater adventure to be had in diving into the historical and theological side of things. And I can tell that that's something that's going on in your art too, because you post facts about it and everything in the captions. You don't leave your art just out there for just people to look at. And I think honestly, in my opinion, that's probably what gets most people not only to notice your artwork, but to follow along with it because you're teaching them something. What's your process in that?
Yeah, that's great to hear. And I hope that's the case because while I did start out just really wanting to reignite my interest in illustration, there is that deeper core of it that's really the thing motivating this to begin with, and that is my love for the faith and the love for Christ and the church. And so, yes, sometimes these things just kind of hit me outside of myself. I'll get this hint of inspiration from something, or I'll look at something differently, or I'll come across something I read, and I'm like, I want to, pull it. And I have a tendency to go down some rabbit trails, just chasing his little historical anecdotes throughout the period, throughout the 2,000 years of church history. And when I do, and when something comes across as really interesting, or it adds some new layer or context to Scripture, that stuff just blows me away sometimes. Especially, I write about typology a lot because typology is not something I ever heard growing up, and it is something that is. And so yeah, a lot of the posts I'll try and draw these from Old Testament and the foreshadowing of the New Testament in various ways. There's of course the prophecies about Christ and things like that. I think all Christians know that, but there's deeper layers to some of the things. One of the things is, this is what turned me off from the Bible at an early age, is we pick up a Bible, we determine what our favorite translation is going to be. And that Bible's been translated multiple times over history. We are now 2,000 years outside of the culture, the environment, the time period, all of that, the language, and we presuppose that we can pick this up and just understand it. Some of it you can, some of it's very spiritual, some of it's encouragement and motivation, but there's a lot of it that's much deeper than that. And so that's why when I dig back into the church fathers, it gives you a perspective from the time of the apostles and just after, and the centuries following it, and the things that they passed on. It's like, what did they understand this to be? When they read this, what were they interpreting this as? What did the apostles tell them this meant? And so when I find stuff like that, it just lights a fire in me. I'm like, I gotta.
That's cool.
10 years or so, like, yeah, it just blew me away.
That's awesome. Sorry, you cut out for just a second there. I've got a little shifty internet on my side.
Me too.
One question that I wanted to ask, though, could you explain typology for my audience? Because that's actually not something that I'm well versed in at all, and I'm pretty sure most of my audience doesn't really know that either.
Yeah, sure. And I always encourage people, like, I'll give you an explanation, but also go and dig into people who can speak about it intelligently, because I kind of do this as just somebody who loves it. But hopefully my explanations are accurate. So yeah, typology is basically when you can see things in the Old Testament that are types or prefigurements of things to come in the New Testament. And there's a ton of these around Jesus, of course, and most people know some of these stuff, like, and some of it's even mentioned. So like, Jesus is the new Adam. So you have the Adam in the Old Testament, who is part of the fall of man, and then you have Jesus in the New Testament, who's the new Adam, who raises all creation to the life of grace and salvation. You have the Ark of the Covenant, which held within it the manna from heaven, the rod of Aaron, the bread from heaven, the rod of Aaron, and the law from Moses, right? Well, within Mary, you have within her Jesus incarnate, who is the bread of heaven, literally who carries the priestly role as the prime mediator, the only mediator, and then you have the law incarnate in the flesh. And so there's these. And there's all kinds of these. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. Those are two of the major ones, and then from there's all kinds of little smaller ones. But it just gives a whole new layer to Scripture that's almost like vertical, where you can just look down upon the layers of it, and it all kind of makes sense of the New Testament.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting, because I think even though I've grown up in a church most of my life, I only just recently started learning about the differences in the books of the Bible, like how there's a lot of poetic books of the Bible, and then how there's a lot of analytical books of the Bible, and then of course everybody knows the Gospels, right? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Yeah.
But then there's the books of like wisdom, like Proverbs, Ecclesiastes,
Right.
and Job, which, by the way,
Right.
uh, it it like sends me into like a fever dream every time I read those three books, like learning about the wisdom, but like the different angles of wisdom over and over. Um, I just to me, it's I think you're right on track. Anybody who just picks up and reads the Bible without knowing anything about it, they'll get something out of it, but you've got to almost read it over and over and over, and then like have other people explain things to you, and then learn the historical context and the poetic context. Is that something that?
And that is,
Go ahead.
yeah, yeah. I'm sorry, it's that lag again.
You're
Um,
good.
that's so key too, because it's what I misunderstood when I was young, and it's what I would say a large part of the culture just doesn't understand today.
Hmm.
Those outside Christianity who pick up the Bible and just they just read it as they would any other book, and then just assume that it's just one collection of books with all the same purpose to it, are just completely missing the point. And so yeah, each book of the Bible was written for a very specific intention. It was written with a different motive. It was, they're not all, some of them are just histories, some of them are not. And so to your point, I mean, that's, it's so important in just getting those basics down before you even pick the Bible up, because you got to understand what you're reading to begin with. If you read a poem as history, you're going to be all mixed
Yeah.
up.
Oh yeah, seriously. I think another thing that just for me personally, I'm 26, so I'm considered a millennial and everything. And um, I don't mean to bring generations into it or anything, but I think just one thing that me and my wife talked about lately in our Bible study, and just basically, talking amongst our community. Um, it seems like a lack of knowing this actually is a direct reflection on where we're at today. And I mean, I'm sure you're
Totally.
pretty much aware of just how the world's going on and stuff, but I don't think enough people, like, I think a lot of people obviously watch the news and they watch what's going on in the world, but not a lot of people are taking an introspective look inside of the church. And to me, I feel like we're kind of in shambles right now. Do you think so?
Totally. To me, one of the biggest problems, I mean, but we're speaking from an American
Right.
perspective. One of the things about Christianity is you have Christians all over the world, and they're listening to this sometimes and like, well, I mean, I don't know. This is a human problem, but I think one of the things that's happened is as religion has been stripped out of the fabric of society and it's not commonplace in the culture, nature abhors a vacuum. That's going to get filled with something. And what I find kind of worrying these days is it's being filled with all kinds of different ideologies, whether it's political or whatever. And people don't just tend towards a neutral state. They don't just stay there. They're always going to gravitate towards something. And so if they're not gravitating to this revealed truth that gives us purpose and explains who we are and what we're here for, we're going to glean onto any ridiculous notion that comes and entertains us. And that was my youth. I spent my youth being raised by these horrible ideas, and my soul was very much in jeopardy for it, and I had no clue about it. So yeah, I would definitely say that's a big problem right now.
Yeah. Um, I'm honestly not sure how to address it though. What the problem is for me too is like even within my own community, uh, there are some issues that me and people within my own community are finding ourselves on the pretty much opposite ends of the spectrum on. And we both are looking at it from what we would say is a Christian perspective, which then really scares me as a Christian man, where I'm like, okay, well, I'm telling you that I feel this way because I'm a Christian, and you're telling me you feel that way because you're a Christian. Something is going on here, and we need to get to the bottom of it. It's like And maybe, maybe it could just be, a part of the world that you come from, but to me, it seems like somehow there's been a crack in at least the American church, and the crack is getting bigger, and a part of me is begging and pleading for people to learn what Christianity is on a deeper historical, theological, and apologetic sense so that we can at least move forward. We can figure out where we are and we can figure out what perspective we land on, but then we move forward amicably and we move forward, back to being in unison again. Because I don't feel like we're in unison, and I'm really outside of that. I'm not sure how to address it, but
Well, it's a big problem in Christianity because anytime we're divided as Christians, um, we're letting it crack in the door for the culture to creep in, or for external forces to creep in and just divide us
mhm,
further. It's one of the things that I can honestly say that attracted me to the Catholic Church is that it's the church is very diverse in thought, and but it goes only so far. I mean, we can debate about non-essentials all day
yeah,
long, but on critical matters of that are central to Christianity and to Christ and those sorts of things, it's as solid as stone. And I I think it's yeah, I don't know. I mean, how do you fix it? I don't know. It's such a big problem, and it's this fragmentation's been going on since the beginning of the
yeah,
church. I mean, if you look in Acts, the first thing they're facing already is people at disagreement with each other.
hmm
One of the unique problems we have in the society now, I think, is that uh, people have so many different ideas about what Christianity is, even within the church. So it's very hard to get people to to even, especially here in this country.
yeah,
America, this American branded Christianity
right,
has become such a big influence that it's really minimizing the scale and effect of Christianity. What it really should be doing is spreading light to the world. It's not about this country,
right,
but yeah, I mean that's one of the reasons I started shifting my art into um, giving a little bit more historical information and context to things, because art is an easy way to communicate to people.
yeah,
It's not confrontational. It doesn't knock people over the heads. When you see art, it speaks to you, and you really don't. There's almost nothing you can do when you hear a beautiful piece of music or you look at a beautiful piece of art. It forces itself on you, and you have
right,
no option except to respond to it because it comes from a deep place within you. I mean, this is why it's a transcendental. The transcendentals of good, truth, and beauty, they speak to you directly, and you really can't avoid it. So art's a good way to kind of help unite people, I think, and
mhm,
that's what I try to do anyway,
yeah.
to bring it back to that.
Well, for sure. Do you draw your inspiration from any particular art or artists, like as you pour yourself into your work?
You know, I think initially I did. My wife and I were pretty fortunate that we got to travel a lot years ago in Europe, and it became a thing for me even when I came back to the States to whenever I'm in a new city or whatever, I always stop into the churches there, and I just take a look at some of the art that's in them, because it's really moving, and it's something that, especially in Europe, when you go back to the older churches that are hundreds of years old, and these are churches that people didn't put their name on it. They're almost, they're built by huge communities of people that are anonymous. They spent their entire lives building these centers of their town, and they die without anybody ever knowing their name. And it's some of the most glorious art you can ever find. And just seeing some of that really got things started for me, and started kind of turning the gears in my head about, or turning my inspiration.
Mm,
And so I kind of ran with some of that. And but I'm so busy now that I find it's kind of better to not kind of know what's going on up there, because I don't like things to kind of like influence where I'm going with my own pieces. I prefer for it to just
mm,
kind of come up naturally by my own inspiration.
yeah.
But yeah, initially seeing those churches inspired me. I never paid attention to like Renaissance art or things growing up. I'm almost learning this. I'm in my early 40s now. I mean, I'm almost learning this now for the first time. And it was
Hmm.
kind of like rediscovering, first of all, rediscovering the faith, which kind of gave me the motivation to even start looking at these things again. But then just going back into the traditions, the artistic traditions of the church, and just finding these things again at this late stage in life. It's almost like a new discovery for me. You know, I just wasted my youth basically on being pushed here and there by the culture, and I really lost out for that. So I'm trying to make up for it now.
Well,
I mean, there's people in
go ahead.
yeah, there's people in history that I look at, like Gustave Doré, who did a lot of the etchings in the 19th, I think he was 19th century, might be 18th century, or some of like the Baroque era sculptures. Like I love sculpture and etched illustration work, so I kind of try and actually combine some of those
Hmm.
styles in my own work.
That's cool. Well, I mean, obviously, you could say you wasted your youth, but I think, the Lord had a path for you to end up right where
Yeah,
you are, you know what I mean? But,
yeah.
you know, uh, your art, like, obviously it does seem really Renaissance inspired and everything. And I like what you were referencing that you like pull it from and everything. Do you, do you have any plans on expanding in any different directions, or do you kind of have this medium going right now where you're kind of just drawing figures right now, like patron saints or other characters of scripture?
Yeah, I've, since I left my regular employment, and this is pretty much what I'm doing now. I've taken on various projects where I'm getting some versatility in the types of jobs I'm working on. So yeah, my only rule is that it's, and this is just because I wanted to focus on Catholic art, is that whatever subject I'm working on, it's got to be Catholic. And so whether it's architecture or figures from the Old Testament or figures from the New Testament, scenes from history that might be religiously centered. Everything's pretty much on the table, and I'm inspired by all of it. I do have some plans to do some more historical pieces that are tied to the faith. Um, but yeah, there's a lot more to come. It's just a matter of time. Like it's like since I left my job and I'm pretty much drawing all day. It's like I seem to have less time. I don't know how that happened.
Yeah. Well, I did want to ask about one piece. I know you, like lately have done patron saints or other
Mm.
like figures of the Bible, but one of the first pieces that I saw when I did some digging on you was a crusader.
Hmm.
Some people would say, maybe who probably aren't educated on the subject, that the Crusader is more of a frowned upon piece of Catholic history just because it was a religious group of crusaders who went and basically plundered an entire land that I guess in today's standards isn't theirs. And, you know, some person says this, some person says that, but why was the Crusader one of your first pieces?
How long is this show? 2 hours? I gotta need
No,
the
I
next.
mean we can go forever, dude. I don't care.
Okay.
But
Because yeah,
yeah,
to dive into that, I would. Oh, there's so many angles to hit that on. Yeah, but talking about like why that was one of the first pieces I did, maybe that's a good place to start rather than hitting all of the misinformation. So that piece was actually inspired by a priest who was trying to reignite people praying the rosary. And so one of the things I like I said, been saying in this interview, I love historical anecdotes. And so one of the things that he had mentioned was that a lot of, and at the time people did not, they were not called crusaders. They didn't think of themselves as crusaders. They were pilgrims who were going on pilgrimage to the Holy Land, and they were protecting fellow pilgrims. That's really how all of the controversy or the battles and stuff like that eventually started. But so as they would go on these pilgrimages, they would carry their rosaries, and they would prayer was what they considered their most important weapon. It wasn't even the sword. Like they knew that if they were not praying for their soul and with their soul, that they whatever battle they were going to get into, they had no chance anyway. So I found that very motivational. because prayer's not always easy, and there are lots of distractions and challenges that constantly will bombard you, especially as it seems like you make the determination to pray. It's like, especially when you get bombarded by distraction. And
Yeah.
so, which is another good reason for the rosary, actually, since it's such a meditative way of praying. But I really just that mood about it and kind of reignited this energy around praying the rosary and in the context of this historical period. But yeah, there's a lot of just bad history out there
Yeah.
about the Crusades.
Well, what? Give me some examples. Because I mean, even for me initially, uh, I only, I mean, I didn't grow up learning about the Crusades. I don't have a Catholic
Mhm.
background at all. So anytime somebody brings that up to me, I'm like, yeah, I don't know what to tell you. But
Yeah. Well, and honestly, I didn't either. And I like I said earlier, I'm not an intellectual, I'm not a historian, but I do enjoy doing it as reading about these things as a hobby. So,
Mhm.
but if you a couple things just to say off the bat, the term Crusaders was came about much later, and there's some history you can dig into on that about where that term came from, especially these days how it's used.
Mhm.
It's used as more of a when it came into vogue in more recent times, it was kind of a slander on the Christian pilgrims. But there was not this idea of one unified crusade. I mean, the Crusades happened over a period of a couple hundred years, I believe. Um, and you gotta imagine that you're walking from place to place. They weren't taking ships; they were walking most of the time. Most of the people couldn't afford horses, so you're talking about months long journeys. The battles were not like perpetually ongoing; they were here and there over time. And the reason why the battle started is because as pilgrims were going into the Holy Land, which had been a Roman territory after the fall of Jerusalem, or the time of Christ, obviously, but then after the fall of Jerusalem, it sort of became a backwater of the Roman Empire. And when Christianity eventually became legal in the Roman Empire, it freed it up for pilgrims to go and visit, and they wanted to see these places where Christ lived, and so they'd start to make churches and note where Christ lived and some of the gospel accounts where these things happened. And so over time, pilgrims would journey from Europe to go and visit these places. Well, in the 700s, that all changed when Muhammad and Islam came out of Arabia and into that part of the world. I mean, you just look at a map about, how those conquests spread from Arabia all the way up to North Africa and even into parts of Europe by the time the Crusades even started. And there started to be a lot of conflict there with Christians who were on pilgrimage to the Holy Land. And so initially people were starting up efforts to go and protect travelers on the way to the Holy Land. And I mean, there's a lot you can say about this. Eventually, as things started to escalate, they did call crusades, but there wasn't one massive crusade. It was, I think there were about 10 independent crusades that all happened at different times. And yeah, as is the case, not only with just that period of time where the world was such a different place and a very hostile place, but as is always the case with war, I mean, there are always, unfortunately, things that go bad, and this is no exception to that. But it was certainly not it was not one sided by the Christians, and it was certainly not descriptive of all of the Crusades or what actually the
yeah,
intent was behind it.
I think that's something that I think I kind of constantly have to give a defense for nowadays is when I'm with agnostic friends, I have some account for every Christian that's ever made a mistake or done something evil ever. And I'm like, well, that's
Right,
the perfect
right. That's
issue.
we have a lot of yeah. We carry around a lot of like responsibility in their eyes to for these types of things, and yeah, the funny thing is, at the time, they probably would have been Christians. So, you know,
That is such a funny, that is so funny that you say that because it is like, that has been something that has infuriated a lot of like my agnostic friends where I was like, dude, you would have been in it. Like you would you would have been there. Like I'd go
Yeah,
as far as to say like if you
right.
were even if you were a blonde hair, blue eyed like German person in 1942, you would have been a Nazi. And it's like it's kind of a brutal comparison, but it's like those places where they were doing those things, like some of my friends were like, I'm so ashamed uh, that my ancestors could have possibly like owned slaves in America. I never would have done that. And I'm like, we can all sit here and like condemn anything that's ever happened that we all know is bad, but bro, I'm pretty sure you like you would have been a part of some of this. Like there's no exception. I mean, but yeah,
Yeah, it's one of the things about history that is unfortunate, and I think it's more of a modern thing, is where people are judging people hundreds of years ago by today's standards.
yeah,
And the world at that time, I mean, it would have been as foreign to us as it would have been to them, and asking them to understand our world today. They wouldn't even it'd be like a different planet to them.
yeah,
Um, as Christians, of course, that's why we're called to account, to always have our soul in the right place, so that we make um, moral decisions based on Christ, not based on whatever external circumstances. And there have been those
yeah,
people throughout all of history, and they're usually the ones that stand above the times. And it's one of the things I love about the Catholic Church is you look at the saints that we recognize in the church, and these were people that were counterculture. They were um, examples of taking up their crosses and going the hard way to follow Christ, and
mhm,
that's why they stood above their times.
yeah. But even some of them too were flawed. You know, some of them,
Oh, sure, yeah, yeah.
well, Saint Augustine, like for he
Hmm.
like he couldn't stay like faithful or something. It was not like that Jesus. He just had a problem with I think kind of being with women or something. I'm obviously speaking on something that I know little to nothing about, but
Well, that was before. Yeah, that was before his conversion. So before his conversion, he was living a provocative life, and he
yeah,
eventually converted into a heretical sect, and then he was taken under his wing by Ambrose, who was one of the strongest Christians of his time. Actually, stood up
okay,
against the emperor for
oh
his
wow,
sins, and after he converted, he had a full conversion. If you read the Confessions of Saint Augustine, he actually details his life and that part of his life pretty well. Yeah.
um, but yeah, no, into that history and giving an
Yeah.
account for some of those things that it's such a brutal road, I guess, because I mean, obviously, all we want to do is point people to the example of Jesus and say, like, look, this is the perfect example. Like, if you look at all the other characters in the Bible, they were brutally flawed and they messed up all the time. I don't know why that surprises anybody. Jesus was literally the only person that did it right, and they killed him for it, you know?
Yeah. All right. So this is a thing that when I was young, I just completely didn't understand. And I think this is something that the culture at large doesn't understand too. When they hear about Israel being the chosen people and things like this, there's a misconception that, oh, well, these people were must have been perfect because, they were God's chosen people. And yet you look at what they do in the Bible. How can they say that they're the chosen people? But that's the point. The
Hmm.
point is that they were a completely messed up people. They were fallen people affected by sin, and they needed the Savior. Um, so you look at the Old Testament and some of the just horrendous things that happen, and the violence and everything else. And it's easy for the culture to say, how can Christians read this? And we say the same thing. But as Jesus said, pick up the stone, and who's going to pick up the stone first and
Right.
cast it? I mean, we're all fallen people. This is the reason why all of us need Jesus. And um, yeah, to try and do justice to the Crusades or any of these other events in history on a podcast like this is probably not going to happen. But the point of those things is that Uh, well, you know what? I lost my point.
No worries, man. No worries. I think what you're trying to make is like we've got to capture every piece of history because whether it's brutally flawed or there's something, really virtuous to it or something very valuable to be learned, it all still does point to like the glory of Jesus, you know what I mean? Like even some of the artwork that like you have in there, um, that has been more recent and stuff, it's all still pointing to like a very like honest truth that like Jesus is the only perfect one. There actually was another piece
Mhm.
though that I wanted to ask you about, and this was one I actually didn't even read the caption because I wanted you to explain it to me. But it's one of your first pieces again, but it's a heart with a crown of thorns around it and a cross coming out the top. And I think it's a crimson red. And I think I can
Mhm.
pull it up right here, but I think you might know what I'm talking about. But
Yeah, that's the Sacred Heart of Jesus. Yeah.
so I guess I've never thought about like the Sacred Heart of Jesus. I don't know if that's a Catholic thing or not, but is that something that was just kind of inspired by yourself, or are you drawing that from an actual historical anecdote?
Yeah, so that's a good example of a historical devotion. So, and you find this a lot, when the Catholic Church traces its origin to Christ, and 2,000 years of following Christ, various people over time have um, come up with devotions to meditate and pray at a deeper level on some of the mysteries of Christ's life and some of the things that he has done in his life, his sacrifice, his passion and death. So there are various personal devotions that people have come up with over times, and the Sacred Heart is one of them. It's one of the devotions. I believe it popped up in the medieval era at some point.
Hmm.
I actually don't know, but it's quite old. It's one of the older ones of the church, and yeah, it's just a way to meditate on his love for us, his passion and death, and what ultimately he came to do and sacrifice for us
Hmm.
out of just that infinite love that he shared, um, yeah, to redeem us.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
Um, so, brother, what do you hope to do with this? What do you hope to make out of all this that you're making here?
Yeah, I mean, I was really motivated as the account started to take off and things started to come into a different shape than I had expected. I saw an opportunity to use this. Social media wasn't around for me 20 years ago when I was a young artist. It's opened up so many possibilities just to reach people and to communicate in a different way and to share my art at a larger level. And so part of it's just personally motivated. I look. You're right. The Lord obviously uses things in your life to lead you to where you are, or where He wants you to be. And there are many of those times in my life that I look back and I think about some of the things that I was misled by, and it's sad. I've gotten to a good place through it now, and I know that was there for a reason. But I see so much of the culture and young people, especially, just being misled by things that um, you know the world tells you is going to make them happy, or it tells you that it's this is entertaining, or this is something you want to spend your time on, whether it's the movies or the music. I mean, there's just so much just garbage being put out in the culture right
Yeah.
now, and it just seems to be getting worse and worse and more degraded. And there's this, art has become all about how do we disfigure beauty, and
Hmm.
um, it just started driving me crazy. And so I see an opportunity to use art to reconnect people in a way to connect with the transcendentals, good, truth, and beauty, in a way that's goes back, ties into this tradition that's been passed down through the church, these artistic traditions. But now I have an opportunity to do this in a digital medium with social media in a way that resonates with people who may not ever step foot in the church. They might never see these beautiful works of art that take place, just beyond the doors of the church in their neighborhood. Well, if I can take some of those concepts and themes from their church or from history, and start to put it out into the world, yeah, start to do what I can with whatever talents has given me to kind of counterbalance the culture at this point, and some of just the depressive aesthetics that seem to be just dominating. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, that's one part of it, is just to do that. But yeah, so people, I said before, people right now, things are so heated, especially in America.
Yeah.
Everybody disagrees with somebody about something. I mean,
Right.
and if they don't, they'll find something.
Yeah.
And social media, that's probably one of the more negative aspects of social media, is that it's really just become a place to fight with people and assume the worst of the person you're speaking to on the other side of a screen.
Yeah.
Well, art has an ability to break that barrier, and I don't even need to use words. Like, if somebody wants to read my captions, fine, but I'm hoping that at least something about the image that I pray the Holy Spirit inspires will reach somebody who's maybe just been spending too much time looking at the garbage in the world,
Hmm.
and maybe there's something about it that's like, there's beauty here. Beauty, when you see true beauty, you want more of it. It becomes addictive. It leads to a flourishing in your soul. When you experience uh, something that's not beautiful, there's almost like this shrinking in, and it starts to become heavy and depressive.
Mm.
And so I think the more and more people are opened up to things that motivate your soul, help it to flourish,
Yeah.
then if I can do anything to help that, then thanks be to
Well,
God.
dude, that is, man, that is exactly what I feel when I came across your artwork. My buddy sent me your profile, and he was like, "You got to check this guy out. Like, this
Okay.
is really nifty." But looking at your artwork, not only was it like really like aesthetically pleasing and everything, but the more that I looked at it and the time that I spent with it, when you exactly what you were talking about, like when you see true beauty, like when the truth has its day, your mind like all of a sudden realizes what oxygen actually is, and it's like, oh, I need that. I need more of that. Like I need to hold on to that. I need to protect that. I need to
Yeah.
preserve that and store that in my soul
Yeah.
because I can feel the the taintedness of like just letting the other kind of artistic garbage that's happening today like kind of taint my soul and drag me down into a
Mhm.
place where I'm not like living truthfully. Um, brother, I really
Yeah.
do see that with your art, and I think you're gonna kill it in the future with just a lot of projects and stuff that you'll be working on. Are you gonna try to do work for other churches or missions organizations or anything like that? Because I mean, the only reason I asked this actually is because I just interviewed a girl who runs a nonprofit for human trafficking in currently. I connect you to, but she's building it, and it's called Zara House. But she is just fighting tooth and nail to give women a place to stay who have been able to escape human trafficking. But I wondered if you know uh, doing artwork for other missions organizations was a part of your going to be a part of your portfolio at all.
Wow, God bless her for that. Yeah, it's hard. I'm so motivated by everything. It's like I want to do everything. So I had to like kind of cut myself off, and one of the ways I did that was just to put some well-defined barriers around it, and um, just say that I was going to focus on Catholic art. But yeah, I mean, I love that to hear some of these ministries that people are starting up, and I mean, if there are ways for me to promote them or do whatever, I'm generally open to that, because anything that's leading to the building up of the kingdom and saving souls, I mean, that's a good thing. Um, so yeah, I just now have jumped into doing this full time, so I'm kind of like hit the ground running, and I'm trying to like fix things as the car's rolling down the street, and so I'm putting everything into place as it's moving. So it's been quite a these last couple of weeks have been quite a busy time,
Hmm.
but um, so I don't know that I have definite plans yet. I'm just trying to get my to do list
That's
done.
awesome. Well, I'm sure the Lord's going to put a lot of work on your plate. Um, Brother, we're almost coming up on an hour here. I think your
Okay.
testimony and everything that you've done has been spectacular. I love your artwork. I plan on showing it to everybody that follows me and listens to this podcast. But if people want to support you in a way, I want to go ahead and I want to plug a lot of your content or the way that people can support you. I noticed you had an Etsy shop. How can people support you with your artwork?
Yeah, thanks first of all for even asking me to come on and giving me this time to just chat about these things that are important, I think. Um, Sorry to anybody that didn't want to hear about the Crusades. I guess I should have prepped for that.
No.
Um, and I've got more to say on that one. That seems to be the only post that I get flack for. So feel free to carpet bomb my Rosary Crusader post if you have issues with the
Nice.
Crusades. But yeah, so thank you very much for like even having me on and
Mm.
wanting to talk about this stuff. So yeah, I guess the easiest way to connect with me, these days, social media ties to everything. You can find me at Baritus Catholic on Instagram, and that's Baritus Catholic. And it's Baritus Catholic Illustration on Facebook. I'm not as good about staying up to date on Facebook. Facebook is a
It's a
confusing
lot.
place. I don't
It's
know
a
what's
lot,
going
dude.
on. Yeah, I'm trying to wrap my head around it, but Instagram's a little bit more my level. I mean, yeah, I'm most active on Instagram, and that'll lead you to my Etsy site. I am on Etsy, or you can just go to barituscatholic.com, and that kind of links you to everything as well, and you can see some of my art. But yeah, thanks for
Yeah.
calling that
Yeah, man,
out.
for sure. And also, before we wrap this up and everything, uh, please do illustrations of the Book of Job for me if you already know what I'm talking about. Because at some point, I want to see your perspective on some of that. Because obviously, some of the greatest descriptions of God's creations given in that book, and I'm like, oh man, I'll be excited to see that work when you do it.
That is so crazy because one of my so I've got a lot of jobs that are coming to me, and I seem to be very busy like doing those jobs, and it's but there's this part of me, I'm writing this constant list about things I want to do, and so one of those things is to illustrate the Book of Job. I mean, that's like one of my favorite books. So um,
Man, I'll be
God
excited to see
willing, if I live long enough and I can get all these other things done, I will. I hope to get to that.
Man, man, I'll be excited to see that. You'll have to let me know when you're about to release it and stuff.
I
But
will. Yeah,
cool. Well,
definitely.
Chris, brother in Christ, thank you so much for coming on. Your work's
Yeah.
amazing. And just to talk to my audience real quick, obviously Chris told you guys where you can find his work, how you can support him and everything. Um, please do yourself a favor and check out Baritus Catholic because it is pleasing to the eye and it is also informative for the soul. And Chris has a great thing going on. So, Chris, brother, once again, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate it, man.
All right. Thanks be to God.
Absolutely.
God bless you. Thank you for this time, and keep up your ministry as
Thank you,
well.
sir.
God bless you. Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.